There's many heavy things that we ought to discuss, not the least of which the disastrous southern border and the disastrous plan that Joe Biden has put into place that will do absolutely nothing on the southern border. A little bit closer to home, we continue to get drips and drabs. Our own Brian Wilson, afternoons on Super Talk 99.7 WTN and The Drive. Obviously, he's been providing a lot of information with regard to what was inside the Covenant Manifesto. Clearly, there is an interest in that. I have to tell you, at some point, my interest wanes if we're just going over the details of the various ways this person was crazy. I know it's important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not poo-pooing it in any way. I'm not suggesting that it doesn't need to be done. At some point, I know that this woman was crazy. At some point, I know that she was mentally deranged. I want to know what medication she was on. I want to know what interaction she had. And a lot of this is coming out, don't get me wrong. But I don't need to know that she did a 3-page long essay about her imaginary penis. I mean, I don't need to know that she was crazy. I don't need to know that sadly the system mollycoddled her in such a way that exacerbated her crazy. I don't need to know that in order to understand that she did not get the help that she needed. But I do believe that this brings up a lot of good conversational points about what direction we want to go in as a society, as a state, and as a community. New details coming out yesterday and today. Tennessee Star has been on top of this story as well, along with Brian Wilson of The Drive on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, that the Covenant School shooter reportedly used funds from a Pell Grant to buy guns that she used for the mass shooting in March of 2023. Brian Wilson reported this yesterday afternoon, or was it yesterday or the day before? It might have been the day before. That Hale, quote, took money from an education grant she received to purchase her weapons and pay for training at a local gun range. Having a little bit of knowledge as to how Pell Grants work, I would suggest to you that that's kind of the way that they work. Once you are approved for a Pell Grant, that Pell Grant comes to you in the form of money, and then you are able to do with that money what you want to do with that money. I don't know that anyone is suggesting that ought to be changed in any way. That is new information, and obviously it's information that will put in a laundry list of information about how this individual conducted her activities up until and prior to the March 2023 slayings of 6 of our own, 3 young children and 3 members of the Covenant School community. Officers responded to the Covenant campus. Obviously we know what happened upon the response. Hale had at least 7 guns, 3 of which were recovered from the school. She killed, as I mentioned, 6 people, including 3 children. To my knowledge, and Audrey Hale purchased her weapons legally. Unless new details have come out that I am unaware of, unless you believe that discussing fantasy in a psychiatric setting would mean that you no longer are allowed to keep and bear arms. That's where I want it's where I ended the show yesterday, and it's where I want to start the show today. Because as I said yesterday, these new details, many of them are very salacious. But at the same time, they bring up some very important questions about how we choose to manage ourselves in our society and how we choose to move forward at this point. There are some within our midst that would suggest that at any point that it is determined by and I'm just telling you what others say, that if you want to stop these types of things, that you have to have the ability for a psychiatrist or a psychologist to, I'm going to use the phrase intentionally, if they are to flag an individual that they think may or may not be a danger to themselves, then that would start a chain of events that would necessarily end with removing their guns from their person. Well, I'm not casting aspersions on any of the players when I say this, and I'm not taking a stand one way or the other. I'm introducing this to you as a way to have this discussion. This is the real discussion that needs to be had, and here it is. Isn't that what Governor Bill Lee said he wanted to talk about with regard to a red flag law? Isn't that what the state of Tennessee soundly and roundly said no to? Yet now, and I'm merely observing, don't kill the messenger, but now, with some of the new revelations, I hear a chatter about, well, the psychologist should have turned this person over to the police. And I say to you, and then what? The police don't have any authority to go take that person's guns, nor should they. There still has to be something done in a court of law, and I'm not here to defend the psychologist, psychiatrist, or the series of psychologists and psychiatrists that are involved in this situation, but I would suggest to you, if you want to lay any blame there, seems to me that the parents should have known first and foremost what was going on. I don't agree with red flag laws, because I do not believe that red flag laws work. However, I find it interesting that some of the same cast of characters that were right there with me against the concept of preempting the proper chain of events, the proper course of action, when it comes to finding someone unable to fully function in a civilized society in such a way that we're going to give you all of your rights. I mean, the proper place to do that is in a court of law. Yet even then, when we talked about, well, a judge would have to sign off on some of these things, I guess this merits the question, and it's as good a topic as any on a First Amendment Freestyle Friday. At what point in the process do we determine that someone is too crazy to own guns? Isn't that what we're talking about? For some people, there is never a point where someone is too crazy to own guns until such time as they do harm to other people. And that's a perfectly acceptable position for me. I don't know that I share it. Is it only up until the point, and these are hard questions. I understand that they're hard questions, especially for a Friday Libertarian lunch here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. But these are all the questions, all of the reporting that Brian Wilson's doing, all of the reporting that Michael Patrick Leahy's doing. These are the questions that I begin thinking of. Like, where is your line in the sand when it comes to mental illness and gun ownership? Because all of this reporting is leading to the idea that someone should have done something before she attacked the school. And I fully understand that. We want to believe that we could have solved or fixed any and every issue or situation or tragedy like this prior to these tragedies happening. Hindsight, that's why the phrase is out there. Hindsight's 20/20. You can always see the path forward. When you're looking behind, are you... I mean, 4931 says right there, full stop, shall not be infringed. 4931, does that include incarcerated people? Because it doesn't say, see, I get so frustrated by the purists. We've already carved out exceptions. We don't allow people in jail to have guns. But guess what the Second Amendment doesn't talk about, my man? The Second Amendment doesn't say, shall not be infringed, comma, unless you are found guilty of a felony and incarcerated in an institution in a state of your residence. I think reasonable people can come to the conclusion that if you commit an act of violence or an act against another citizen of your community in such a way that you are incarcerated in a rehabilitational institution or a punitive institution, that at some point you don't get to have a gun anymore. We create these I do not, and I want to be clear here, because there are some purists out there, the John Harrises of the world of Tennessee Firearms Association. And I mentioned John because he comes to mind because I saw him last week, and I said hello to him, and he said hello to me. Are we willing to have a discussion about the realities of our world around us or not? And if your answer is no, everyone should be able to own a gun, period, end of the story, then that's fine. That's the society we're going to live in. And you can expect more Covenant schools as a result. Now, on the specifics of Covenant, I don't know. I don't pretend to know. I do know that this is a real conversation that we need to have. I'll get vilified for it, and that's fine. Because I'm against red flag laws. I'm against preemptive measures. But I am also honest enough with you to tell you that if you are with me and you're against red flag laws and you're against these preemptive measures, then in a society that values that level of freedom, you're going to have situations like happened at Covenant occasionally. It is very difficult in a society that values freedom to make these types of decisions. But us collectively have to make those decisions about what kind of society we want to live in. And sadly, in a country that values liberty and freedom, as we do, occasionally tragedies like this are going to slip through. And there's not always an easy fix. And there are some on the extreme other side of the issue looking at their radios right now saying, did you just say that it's an acceptable tragedy that children die because of your Second Amendment? You can look at it that way, I suppose. So there are gun grabbers that want to take them all. And there are purists on the other side that say shall not be infringed means just that, shall not be infringed. And then there's all the rest of us in the middle, having to sort through this sea of information that's been coming out in drips and drabs over the last week and a half and figure out what the hell it means for our children and our future in the state of Tennessee. We'll try to work it out for you. We'll try to continue discussing it as honestly and openly as we possibly can.